With those three, it's dealing with from the time of the first Roman dictator, or I should say the first and only Roman dictator, the 11 subsequent emperors, and then all the way up into the modern day American Empire, the Anglo-American Empire as we know it today. Go ahead.
Verse 3 again. And I beheld, and out of her feathers there grew other contrary feathers.
Right.
And they became little feathers and small.
Continue.
But her heads were at rest.
The heads, remember that. The heads are not, the heads are, quote, not active this shit. The heads were at rest. Continue.
The head in the midst was greater than the other.
So remember, there were 3 heads, and out of the 3 heads, the one in the middle was greater than the other 2. Go ahead.
Yet it rested it with the residue.
But it still was at rest with the other 2 heads. Go ahead.
Moreover, I beheld, and lo, the eagle flew with her feathers, and reigned upon earth, and over them that dwell therein.
Go ahead.
And I saw that all things under heaven were subject unto her, and no man spake against her, no, nor one creature upon earth.
Now, of course, when they say creatures, talking about no man. In other words, this is saying in a different way, the same thing that Daniel chapter 7 explained. It's talking about this eagle, this kingdom, this empire met with no opposition. No one could oppose him. And see, that's how we know speaking in that term is not talking about Rome. Because Rome met with stiff opposition. If you do some it's funny how they don't even teach it in universities. When you watch movies, when you go to take university humanities courses, they make it seem like Rome was over the whole world at the time, and it wasn't. It was just the whole Mediterranean, and they met with opposition from the Parthian Empire. So, for it to say that I saw that all things under heaven were subject unto her, and that no man spake against her, no, not one creature upon her, is talking about this empire in its more latter or more recent era. Go ahead.
Verse 7. And I beheld, and lo, the eagle rose upon her talons, and spake to her feathers, saying,
remember the 12 feathered wings. Now it's saying that a proclamation was made by the very eagle itself and spoke to what?
To her feathers, saying, watch not all at once. Sleep everyone in his own place, and watch by course.
Watch not all I know is saying all of these, eventually, the feathers you're going to see represent the first 12, the first dictator, or I should say the first and only dictator, and then the 11 subsequent emperors that followed. That's all it's talking about. But it was making a proclamation that they all have their predetermined time to rule. Watch, not all at once. Sleep everyone in his own place and watch by course, meaning by appointment. Continue.
Verse 8. Watch not all at once. Sleep everyone in his own place, and watch by course.
Go ahead.
But let the heads be preserved for the last.
Continue.
And I beheld, and lo, the voice went not out of her head.
Read that again, verse 9. I want you to read verse 8 and 9 again. Go ahead.
Verse 8. Watch not all at once. Sleep everyone in his own place,
right?
And watch by course.
Continue.
But let the heads be preserved for the last.
Read that again.
But let the heads be preserved for the last.
So that's showing you. When it is reiterating that the heads are not even in the game, because there's a, don't get me wrong, and we understand that Rome, in its evolution out of being a republic into becoming an empire, it was ruled by a triumvirate, which was a body of 3 figures: Crassus, Pompey, and Julius Caesar. And a lot of people think specifically that it's talking about those. But once we go to chapter 12 and break it down, yes, it is true. Rome was governed initially by Crassus, Pompey, and Julius. And Julius Caesar had to defeat Crassus and Pompey. So this is telling you the heads had to watch by course. Not what? I'm sorry. The heads were all asleep. Then Julius Caesar was assassinated, and Augustus Caesar, or Octavian, or he's known as Augustus Caesar, he ruled in he was a member of a second triumvirate, which consisted of Lepidus, Mark Antony, and Octavian or Augustus Caesar. So you actually, if you want to use the Caesars, or I'm saying the triumvirate, to associate them with being these three heads, there were two triumvirates. And of course, Mark Antony went to war with Octavian, or with Augustus Caesar. But Lepidus, he backed out. He retired. He didn't want no contention, no military contention with Octavian. So we'll show you. We're going to use the scripture itself. Chapter 12 is the interpretation of the dream, and it's going to tell you what those three heads indeed truly are. Go ahead.
Verse 10. And I beheld, and lo, the voice went not out of her head.
Now listen, when it said the voice went not out of her head, this is referring to verse 7. I beheld, and lo, the eagle rose upon her talons, and spake to her feathers. So it's leaving you with the impression that the head of the eagle, or the head, one of the heads of the eagle, is speaking to the feathers. But it says in 10, I beheld, and lo, what?
The voice went not out of her head.
In other words, the voice that spoke to the feathers wasn't coming from the head. Why? The head was asleep. Go ahead. It said they were being specifically preserved until the last. Go ahead.
But from the midst of her body.
But what?
But from the midst of her body.
The head went, the voice came from the midst of the body, speaking to the feathers in general. Go ahead.
Verse 11. And I numbered her contrary feathers.
Now the contrary feathers. The contrary feathers is going, this is verse 11, is going back to verse 3. I'm going to read verse 3. And I beheld, and out of her feathers there grew other contrary feathers. Remember, the initial feathers were 12. 12 feathered wings. Out of those 12 feathered wings, it's saying, out of the body grew other contrary feathers, and they became little feathers and small. So verse 11 is telling us how many of them there were. Go ahead.
Verse 11 again. And I numbered her contrary feathers, and behold, there were 8 of them. And I looked, and behold, on the right side there arose one feather, and reigned over all the earth.
Okay, that's talking about, we're going to go down the list of these feathers once we start breaking it down. And like I said, we're just reading the chapter 11. We're reading about the vision. We're not going to do no serious or thorough breaking down until chapter 12, because chapter 12 breaks it down for us. So as this is talking about the first ruler. Read that verse again, verse 12, brother, 13.
Verse 13.
Verse 12, I want you to read.
Okay.
Go ahead.
And I looked, and behold, on the right side there arose one feather, and reigned over all the earth.
Go ahead.
And so it was, that when it rained,
once this particular feather had its time reigning, go ahead, governing,
the end of it came, and the place thereof appeared no more. So the next followers stood up and reigned, and had a great time.
When it says had a great time, it's not talking about he had a wild and crazy time. It's talking about the second feather reigned a notably long period of time. That's what it means when it said, so the following stood up and reigned and had a great time. It's not saying he had a good time at the party. It's saying he endured a long time. Go ahead. Verse what? Verse 14.
Verse 13 again.
Verse 14. Come on, go ahead.
Verse 14. And it happened that when it rained, the end of it came also, like as the first.
Go ahead.
So that it appeared no more.
Continue.
Then came there a voice unto it.
Now listen to this. After the reign of the second feather, a voice came unto the second feather. Go ahead.
And said, Hear thou that hast borne rule over the earth so long.
In other words, it's speaking to him before this feather's time was up. Before this second feather's time was up, it literally was being notified of something. Go ahead.
And it happened that when it rained, also verse 15, then came their voice unto it and said, Hear thou that hast borne rule over the earth so long.
Right?
This I say unto thee, before thou beginnest